Whoa, look at those special effects that we've got going on right here on the Kubert School channel. Pretty impressive, right? My name is Anthony Marquis. Great to see everybody. We have a really great show planned for you guys. Unfortunately, the co-host with the most, Mr. Fernando Ruiz, cannot join us today, but I think our guest is going to make up for it. He's pretty incredible. He's really a legend in the industry. I like to really drum this up because I like to get people a little bit embarrassed. A true legend of the industry. He's worked, and maybe he just likes hearing that too. I don't know. But I mean, he's worked on everything that you can think of. I mean, he's worked from Daredevil to The Dark Knight Returns up to the Superman, Spider-Man. He's been involved on every major title that you can think of. An award-winning artist. Let me please welcome and proudly welcome Mr. Klaus Janson. Klaus, how are you, sir?
I'm good, Anthony. Good. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to talk to you.
Did I drum you up enough? Was that enough praise? Should I have done?
You froze.
Did I drum you up enough?
There you go.
Did I drum you up enough? Was that enough praise?
More than enough, Anthony. Really. Come on. Give me a break.
Now, for those watching, apparently I'm having some technical difficulties on my end, so I may have to leave and then come back a few times. So my apologies.
Yeah, that seems to work, Anthony.
I've heard that so many times in my life. Just leave and come back.
That's funny.
I try. So what's going on where you are? What's the latest?
You mean in terms of work or in terms
of life? I'll dive into work, but just touching on life. What's going on?
You know, I think we're all sort of in a rhythm at this point. I would imagine the same with you and your family, right? Some sort of things have been established, and we're sort of in a rhythm. And you know, I leave the house maybe once every 2 or 3 days, get some groceries, go out for some exercise. It's the exercise that I really miss the most, you know, I have to say. But everything's pretty good otherwise. You know, the electricity is working, the heat is working, right? You know, I'm grateful for that. And things are okay. The first week or 2 or 3, I wasn't sure if I was going to make it. I think we're good.
You know, it's funny. It took some getting used to. It still takes some getting used to. I have 2 little kids, a 6 and a 5-year-old. And, you know, it demands constant attention. You're always having to play and whatnot. And there's a lot of work. You know, we have the school and the comic shop and freelancing. And so it's a lot of juggling at the moment. But I have to tell you, my wife has been incredible. She's the true superhero of the family and really managed to keep everyone in line and keep everything moving smoothly. But it definitely is taking some getting used to it. But I agree with you. We're all pretty much in that routine at this point of kind of how to juggle things. So it's nice. But outside of the exercise, I definitely need to do more of that because we've been eating a lot of food, a lot of food lately. It's nonstop.
Yeah. I think when this is over, we're all going to meet and we're all going to be like, you know, like Bubble Boys or something, or, you know,
we're all going to be like the groundhog. We're going to pop out, check to see our COVID shadow, and then pop back.
Run to the gym.
Yeah. So how has this, if it has affected you at all, in terms of your work? Does it affect the way that you approach your work in terms of pages? Do you feel that you have more time? Any projects been slowed down due to it?
You know, knock on wood, nothing like that has happened. I think, you know, I'm really kind of fortunate that way. As long as FedEx is, you know, still delivering pages. You know, I scan the pages in anyways and drop them off or send them up to DC digitally. So nothing has been too much of an interruption. You know, I know that a lot of people can't say that, so I feel really guilty, you know, for having it, still being able to work and still being able to, you know, get paid for it and function. You know, it's really fortunate. And in a lot of ways, I'm sure you feel the same way, Anthony, is that, I've been freelancing my entire life and working at home. So this isn't that much different, except the panic about dying, that's kind of new. But working at home has been, I've been doing this for like 45, 50 years now. So.
Can you walk me through what a typical day is like for you? I mean, and now, Klaus, look, I'm going to apologize right out the gate. A lot of these questions, I believe you and I have maybe even talked about, and you've been asked a million times.
Yeah, that's it. Anthony, no worries, please. Yeah.
So what is a typical day like for you? How do you approach the day?
I try to have me time early in the day. So, I'll I don't want to bore you with this, but I'll make breakfast and, read the paper. I get my paper delivered. The New York Times comes to my door, and I read the paper, watch the news, and then usually go to the gym or run some chores. And then I start working at my desk around 3 o'clock. So from 3 to 10 is my workday.
It's funny because everybody always wants to know how does so-and-so work? What's their schedule like? Because you're always trying to find that sort of similarity between yourself and another person that you admire and look up to, and then on top of that, I mean, you teach as well. How many days a week are you a teacher, professor?
I do it only once a week because it's a lot to deal with. Even one class is a lot of energy, a lot of work goes into that, as I know you know. Yeah. So on Mondays, I teach from 12 to 3. And that's, we got 2 more classes this semester. Mm-hmm. I have to say that the kids don't like online teaching. And I understand that. Hopefully we can get back to in-person stuff in the fall. I'm not sure. I don't think anybody knows, but I find, if I may say, one of the things that was really interesting in talking to the students was the realization that having established a rapport with them in person in the fall, in the first semester, in the fall semester, was really, really helpful because I know them by now. So I fear that if we're doing online classes in September, without that, one-to-one connection having been established already, I don't know how that's going to go. It's going to be, I think, a little rough. I mean, what do you think?
It's definitely interesting. Now, as the viewers may or may not know, the Kubert School had never done anything online before. We had never done any online class. So it was a real crash course in having to do something and put it together. And I have to tell you, I'm so incredibly proud of our staff, our instructors, and the students for the way that they've been able to adapt and improvise and really on the fly come together on this. One of the big things I have found, or I've heard from instructors as well, is that they have found it to actually be more difficult, and it's actually more labor intensive online dealing with the students in a good way. Than actually in person. In person, you can kind of work more as a whole, and sometimes by working online, you almost have to.
Anthony, you froze. Okay, you're back.
All right.
It's more labor intensive, you had just said.
More labor intensive, and it's more of a one-on-one sort of breakdown at times because you really have to fine tune it for each person. So I found that to be very, very interesting. I love having the students in the building. I'll tell you that. I want to see the students. I want that interaction. Yeah. And I don't particularly enjoy being distant from them in this way. Yeah. So we have found ways to put together assemblies or just different things like, doing these interviews and whatnot for the students just to kind of keep them engaged. Because that's so important. You have to be involved and you have to want to keep working and stay motivated.
I agree. Yeah. And they, it's almost not fair for the kids, to charge them the same amount of money, and I don't want to get too deep into that, but it's unfair for what they're going through. I really feel for them. The pandemic is not something that anybody planned on, and it certainly wasn't anything that the students planned on. And I feel bad for them. I really, my heart goes out to them.
I mean, I tell the joke a lot. I don't know if it's really a joke, but I can tell you this. I never planned to have to deal with a pandemic in my first year of owning a school,
Anthony, if anybody can pull this off, you can.
I'm trying my best. I'm trying to pull every rabbit out of every hat I own, so we'll see.
I believe that, yes. I know.
But no, I'm really proud of everyone, and we are really doing a great job. And I know for a fact that you're doing great. I would have loved to have had you as an instructor. I always hear so many stories about you as an instructor, and knowing you, I always hear, I love you. I think you're one of the nicest people I've ever met in the industry. But I hear you're quite the drill sergeant. Can you touch on your teaching style a little bit and how you instruct the students?
I just don't think that. Look, if you're going to do this, if you're going to be in school, if you're going to do comics, it requires a lot of ambition and dedication and perseverance and discipline. And the first thing I ask the students in the first class, or tell the students, is, I don't want to see your cell phone. I don't care. I don't care what it is. When you walk into this room, this is a cell phone free area. And if I see your cell phone, I'm going to take it away. I don't want to, you're here to learn. I don't want to see you being distracted by, texting, schmoopy and, bippy and nippy. And, come on, you're here. We got 3 hours. And I really believe, and I was thinking about what to say to the students, in the last class, because I really feel very emotionally connected to them because of the circumstances. And one of the things that I want to say to them is, you only have now. You don't have tomorrow, and yesterday is gone. You only have these 3 hours. And if you waste those 3 hours, they're gone. They're never going to come back. And you've missed an opportunity. And in a way, not in a way, but I firmly believe that the only way you're going to get better as an artist is by working and by drawing. It doesn't come to you. It doesn't knock on your door and invite itself in. Success doesn't work that way. Success and being able to do this for a living requires that you work harder than the guy who's behind you. And there's always somebody behind you, always. Not just in school, but also professionally speaking. And you can't take it for granted that you're always going to be successful. You really have to apply yourself. So in some ways, I think that reputation, I know that reputation is, and it amuses me, but what happens is in class is if you listen to me and you abide by the rules of the class, you will get, I guarantee you will get something out of it. And I feel like at the end of the second semester, which we are at the moment, I still feel, in spite of the pandemic, that is true.
I think anybody just listening to you right now just got a whole bunch out of it. That was pretty inspirational stuff, Klaus.
Well, thanks. Well, I've been doing it long enough, Anthony, that I've seen the patterns, right? I mean, you know, I can tell within a week who's going to make it and who's not going to make it.
Yeah. I mean, it's the truth, though. I mean, it's not always the most talented guy in the room.
Yeah.
And I try to hammer that home with the students or just people that I would meet when I was an editor, or I would talk with different folks that were trying to break in. Is it's just because you can draw some beautiful pages, I need you to follow up and be able to reach out. I need you to be a professional, constantly turn in stuff. Let me see what you got, see if you can hit a deadline. I mean, there's so many different variables that are involved. It's not just about the talent aspect of it. I mean, I tell everybody all the time, I am not the most talented person out there, but I will outwork you. I'll keep working like a dog every single day, and I'll keep coming back. And I think that people need to have that sort of fire inside of them to keep them going,
Yeah, this is not a, the cliche is this is not a sprint. This is a marathon. And you've got to consider the possibility that you want to do this for not just comics, but art in general. You want to do this for a lifetime. And you need the perseverance and the stamina and the smarts, to be able to accomplish that. It isn't easy. As you'd be the first one to say that.
It's a business, it's a business. You have to treat it that way and respect it. And if you don't, it'll very quickly turn on you.
That's right.
And I mean, I'm going to use this to kind of segue into the fact that you've been a true pro for a crazy amount of years, a wonderful career. What was your first project, and how did you break into it?
The very first thing I did was, professionally under my own name was Black Panther. I inked Black Panther over Rich Buckler in a book called Jungle Action. And I got that assignment because I was working up at the office, up at Marvel's office, applying gray tones, Zipatone, to a bunch of reprints that they were doing, magazine-size reprints. They were reprinting a lot of the old 50s stuff from Kirby and Ditko and those guys. And they were printing it in black and white, and they needed some tones. And I had been going to Marvel in DC for about 2 or 3 summers with my portfolio. And they finally offered me this job, coming into the office and cutting Zipatone and stuff like that. So I took it. Of course I took it, And I met Rich Buckler, who had a drawing table in the corner of one of the offices. And he saw my portfolio and he asked me if I would ink, Black Panther. And I said, of course I would. Yeah. And so that was a bi-monthly assignment. I think it was $400 every 2 months. And the fact that you're there, comics is a funny, for me, comics has been an interesting experience because I've always kind of felt that it's really hard and difficult to get in, but once you're in, it's difficult to get out. you just for some reason, you become part of the wallpaper almost. And I know that a lot of my early assignments, I would just be walking around the office and somebody would come out of their cubicle and say, "Hey, do you want to ink this? Or do you want to? Can you help me out?" And of course, I would say yes to everything. So and prior to that, I had met, and maybe you know this, I had met Dick Giordano. Yes. Who was my mentor in tremendously helpful, a wonderful person. The legend is that there are 3 most loved people in comics. Dick was one of them. The other 2 are Archie Goodwin and John Romita Sr. So those 3 are like the holy trinity in terms of being the most liked people. I mean, no one ever has anything bad to say about those 3. And I was lucky enough to know all 3 of them and get close to Dick Giordano. Just a wonderful, wonderful. When I was a kid, I don't want to go into the whole long story.
No, this is great. I love hearing this. I'm like, wow, this is great.
Maybe I've said this, when I was up at the school, but I discovered that DC was giving tours of their offices. I was like 17, and you know how I discovered it was. Do you know Sam Viviano?
Yeah.
I don't know him personally. I know that he teaches at SVA, and I've never told him this. I don't think I've ever met him. But he did a 2-page story in like House of Secrets or House of Mystery or something. And it was about a tour that DC gave every Friday afternoon. So I was living in Connecticut and I had this thing in my head, oh, DC's giving tours. And so I got duded up, I got dressed up, and I went to DC one Friday and I said, I walked in, told the receptionist, well, I'm here for the tour. And she said, oh, well, we don't do that anymore. And I said to her, I looked at her and I said, but I'm wearing a tie. As if to say, come on, help me out here. I got all dressed up for you. So she went in the back and she felt sorry for me because I think I was like crying or something, And she got Jack Miller out, who was the editor of Dead Man and a couple of other books at the time. So he was nice enough, can you believe this? He was nice enough to take me around. I met Carmine Infantino. I met Neil Adams, who was working on a Adam Strange cover. I met Len Wein and Marv Wolfman, who were hanging out. They were just, they were like the hangout guys. And I met Dick. And Dick pointed at me when Jack introduced us and said, I know you. And I got like really scared and, nervous. And it turns out that he remembered my name from all of the letters that I would send to Charlton, It was hilarious. And it turns out that he lived in the town neighboring the town that I lived in Connecticut. So he said, come on up, I'll take a look at your portfolio.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was. I think, my entry into comics would have been delayed greatly were it not for that particular moment. It's interesting to see how it all, if I hadn't gone on the train that day, if the receptionist wasn't nice enough to call Jack, if Dick Giordano were out to lunch, all these things could have gone awry. And somehow, some way, I think about this often, everything just kind of fell together to open up the doorway for me. It's really amazing when you think about when I think about it.
It's
anyway, so I was assistant to Dick for about a year. And then I moved to New York and I got that job at Marvel, applying gray tones. And, the rest is, as they say, history.
We're getting some questions in, and I want to toss some your way.
Please.
In today's day and age, what ways should artists be approaching editors of comic book companies with requests for work in terms of presenting samples and requesting samples and things? I think that ties nicely into your story because of what you were saying, how you just showed up.
Yeah.
What would you recommend to young artists looking to break in now in terms of approaching editors?
I think that, there's two components to getting connected to the industry. And I think that's what we're talking about right at this very second, getting connected somehow to the industry, getting your foot in the door. And a big part of that has to be establishing a relationship with someone that can guide you. some professional that will take interest in you and help you, some sort of a networking opportunity, whether it's online, whether it's, you know, just letters or emails or some sort of, you need feedback, you need advice. So that's a separate thing. But in terms of, you know, these days you have to establish your brand, you know, as the saying goes. So you need to post Instagram, you need to post on Twitter. You have to be extremely careful about what you tweet and about what you post, because editors, for both good and bad, really look at that. And if your name comes up to them somehow, they will look at your tweets and at your posts. And if you are suspicious in any way, or you know, let's say if you're a jerk, they are not going to follow up.
That's a nice way of putting it.
They don't want the trouble. They don't need it. They want people that are professional. They want people that are talented. They want people that are responsible, and they want people that are mature. And if you can't, you know, even discipline yourself to not be a jerk online, you know, you're going to be a jerk in your work process, you know, in your responsibilities. But I think what everybody needs to do, and Anthony, you know, jump in here, because you have much more experience being an editor than I do. But I think that what you need to do is you need to have storytelling pages, and don't wait to connect with an editor to give you a script. There are plenty of scripts online. There are plenty of ways to get a script, but make sure that the script is not something that you wrote. Make sure that it's something that another person wrote.
Marc Chiarellos gave
people who draw stuff that they write for themselves tend to write stuff that is easier to draw. So if you don't like cars, you know, you're not going to write a script with cars. And comics is challenging. And that's the fun part of it, is that it is challenging. So you're going to get a script with cars, and you're going to have to figure it out. And that's great that you have that chance to figure it out. But you should always get a script that's written by someone else. Get a portfolio together of maybe 9 pages, 12 pages, 3-page scenes, 4-page scenes, sequential, obviously, and then start submitting them, you know, via email. Am I wrong, Anthony? What do you think?
You're 100. Am I frozen? Am I okay? Can you hear me?
Oh, you're good. You're good.
You're 100% right. Marc Chiarellos gave wonderful advice the other night, and he was saying, even if you can't get a script, pick up a comic book that's out there, redraw.
Oh, Anthony, you froze. Sorry. Okay.
Good.
Marc gave advice. Go ahead.
He said, even if you can't find a script, take a comic that's out on the stands and just redraw it. Draw it to the best of your ability. Make it better. You know, and you're working from a script then. You're using somebody else's layouts, but make it better. You know, but look, I always felt that as an editor, I could tell within the first 3 pages whether or not I was going to hire you. You know, you could tell very quickly whether a person has the professional chops to start being able to do the work. And I like that 6 to 8 range even. A lot of times I hate seeing the guy showing up with 24 pages of, you know, in his portfolio to show me what he's got. But look, if you can keep it simple, tight, with your best work, and like you said, sequential or narrative art, that's what we want to see, because I want to know that you can tell a story. Because if you can't tell a story, your artwork's worthless. You
froze, Anthony, but I'll finish the sentence. Oh, you're back. Okay. If you can't tell a story, then basically your value to the editor and your value to the company diminishes tremendously. I mean, there's a possibility you may be able to do covers. Even that's difficult because they already have people that do covers, right? I mean, so
Sure.
it's a little difficult to make a living doing just covers, but the value that you have as an artist is the ability to tell a story. Yeah. I mean, I always think, there are two criteria that you need in order to succeed in this business. One is you have to know how to draw. And that doesn't mean that you have to draw like John Buscema or Gil Kane or Stuart Immonen, but you have to be able to draw well enough to create a believable world. So you have to know perspective. I'm sorry, but there's no way around it. And you have to be able to draw, women and men and children and environments and the ability to create a credible world. I look at, say, Bill Watterson, who I think is just amazing, and he draws in a very cartoony style, but it's completely believable. It's completely credible, and he knows exactly what he's doing.
Whether you draw in a cartoony style or realistic, it all comes down to being able to convey the story. At the end of the day, that's the job. I want to touch on...
Anthony, just to interrupt, I'm sorry. The first thing that you have to understand, the first step in telling a story is your layouts, your page, right? Okay. I just wanted to say that, yeah.
No, carry on, because look, we preach about that nonstop. All of the hard work is in your layouts. That's where the whole thought process is. When you finally go into doing your finished pencils and whatnot, that's the fun part.
Yeah.
All the hard work.
Yeah, you froze, Anthony. But the layouts tells the reader, what's important, what's not important. It gives the beats. It gives rhythm to the page. Part of what is so interesting about comics is many things, by the way, but part of what's interesting is that you're a storyteller, but you are also an entertainer. So you need to focus on storytelling primarily, and secondarily, what can you do to be visually entertaining, and what can you give the reader? What can you show them that they haven't seen? Say when Frank and I were doing Daredevil, I would always try to do something a little extra in the inking, whether it's with color or with zipatone or texture or lighting. Kids for some reason like that kind of stuff, and it's enjoyable to look at. Although that should not be, primary, that's secondary, but it's definitely in the mix. Okay, I'm talking too much.
No, I want you to talk.
Go, Anthony, you froze.
Let me see. 1 second, please. All right, I think I'm back.
Yeah, you are. It's hilarious.
This is so sad. I apologize, everyone.
No, it's fun.
I want to talk about digital inking with you. What are your thoughts with digital inking? Do you find it to be too sterile? Do you think that the tools haven't caught up to what it should be, or it's still developing further? Just your overall thoughts on digital inking or digital artwork at this point in time in the industry.
I've become a big fan of the Cintiq and digital work. In my own practice, in my own process. That's a better word, my own process. So I still ink on the board, and I still pencil on the board, but I scan all the pages in, and all of them are worked over digitally. I do less digital when I'm inking someone else. I do more digital when I'm inking myself. So when I'm inking Action Comics over John Romita Jr., 90% of it is on the board. If I'm working on Sacred Creatures, which is a creator-owned book that Pablo Ramundi and I are doing, I would say, 60% is on the board and 40% is digital, sometimes more. I find that digital can be sterile because everybody's kind of sort of using the same brushes and using the same, it's either Clip Studio or Photoshop. And I love Clip Studio. I think it's great. I think it's amazing. But I think it's your responsibility to find a way to do digital without making it look boring or sterile. I'll use those words synonymously. There's no way that you can work in comics anymore without using digital. You really have to. I think Walt Simonson might be one that comes to mind who still does everything on the board. I think so. I'm not 100% sure. But in order for your career to go forward, at this point, you need to know digital. There's no turning back at this point.
But I think it's very important to make note of, though, that whether you're working digital or traditional, the computer or the Cintiq or whatever you're using is a tool. Yeah. So you still need to have a basic understanding or an expert understanding of how to utilize the tools and how to actually draw before you jump into it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, it's just, digital is just a big fat pencil, really, and it does amazing things and you can really, go to town on stuff. But the digital stuff that I do, I try to keep the roughness in it and not get too slick. So a lot of times, there'll be an extraneous line or something that some people might want to take out. I'll leave it in. I like that feeling of spontaneity. I like that feeling of, it looks like he just took a Sharpie and drew something, I think it has a certain amount of energy. That's a good word, by the way, because I think the sterility that we're talking about often comes because there's a distinct lack of energy to it. It's all right. Am I right? Anthony, what would you say? What do you think?
I've heard, and I can understand this, that using digital can be almost like the pursuit of perfection at times. Yeah. It's a very smooth, clean line. And even when you use something that has a little bit of a rougher edge, it's still just a pattern more so. And what makes people's artwork extremely unique are the mistakes that we make. And so sometimes that can be lost in the digital aspect of it. But I
heard you froze, so I'm just going to keep on talking. But I heard a long time ago a definition of style. What is style? And the definition sort of went along the lines of style is the mistakes that you make and how you get out of it. And that defines your style. And I always thought that was a really good definition. Bill Sienkiewicz, when Bill has inked me a couple of times, I've inked him a couple of times. But when I look at his pages, I get the feeling that Bill, he will, he'll start inking something, and clearly it went off the rails. I mean, it's just, you can tell this went in a direction that he may not have planned. But what's interesting about Bill's work is he doesn't go back. He doesn't correct it. He doubles down and he keeps on going. And I like that about his work a lot. He figures out a way to make the mistake work for him. And I think that's a really good approach to. I was listening to a YouTube thing about David Hockney. I don't know if you know that painter, painter. via California or whatever. But he was talking about Vincent van Gogh, who was a big influence on his work. And he said that one of the reasons why people love Vincent van Gogh's work is because they can see how he paints. They can see the strokes. Right. They can see what he's thinking. And I thought that's an interesting way of defining. I guess, the public likes to see the process in your work, and I thought that that's an interesting thing to say. Might be to it, yeah.
I think that's great. Something I want to touch on too is because look, you're an incredible artist and an incredible inker. You've really worked with everybody that you could think of.
Yeah, I've been really lucky, I have to say.
When you are inking someone, do you prefer that they go extremely tight or keeping it more open to interpretation by going a bit looser?
The latter. I like to participate. I like to contribute. I think that when pencilers or the pencils are really, really tight, I start to become more of a tracer. And that's just not as much fun. It's not as interesting. Tight pencils, storytelling and art and inking and penciling and storytelling, all of those things fall under the category of problem solving. How do you solve this problem? How do you tell this story the best way you possibly can? How do you edit your images? Where do you put your focal points? What's your composition about? It's always about problem solving. And tight pencils don't leave a lot of problems to solve. And so it becomes, a little less interesting and a little less challenging and a little bit more assembly line work, I really want to feel that, I'm contributing something. I do think that I have something to offer. So I would like, to be able to offer that. Yeah.
I've always viewed comics as being the ultimate collaboration.
You froze, Anthony.
I've always viewed comics as being the ultimate in terms of collaboration for artists. It's not just a writer or an artist or an inker. It's everyone, even the colorist and the letterer. So I always laugh about the whole argument of who's more important, the writer or the artist. It's everybody's involved and equally important. At least that's my point of view on it. Let's see. We got some lovely questions coming in, so I do want to pull in some because
sure. Yeah.
Feel bad. Touching on the digital tools, have you customized any of your digital tools to simulate closer to your traditional style?
I have not, but what I have done is I've asked some of my students to send me their brushes. So that's, and I haven't customized them because I don't know how, or I haven't gotten to that point yet. But I use some of the brushes that my students have sent me, and I love them for doing that.
That's so funny. I think I should just pull this up just because I think it's a very nice thing that I just read from Marc Chiarellos, and I think you should read that.
Oh, I see that. Mark, thank you. I need to call him.
He's going to call you. Be prepared.
Yeah. Thanks, Mark.
Also have another question for you.
Sure.
Where would you say the line between inker and penciler style comes across the best? There have been some times where one artist is stronger than the other in their presentation. What techniques are used to level the two and not having one overpower the other? It's a little bit of a loaded question, so I'm going to let that sink in for a second.
That's an interesting question. I think that, when I look at, that's Darren, right? Darren, when I look at a job, which means when the pencils come in, especially if it's a new penciler, because someone like, say, John Romita Jr., I'm familiar with his work and I know how to approach it. But if it's somebody that's completely new that I've never inked before, what I'll try to assess is how can I help the pencils? What can I do to help the penciler achieve what I think they want? And where does the penciler need help? And I need help, I mean help in air quotes. My assumption is that if that penciler is good enough to get to this point, he's obviously good enough to work in the business, et cetera, et cetera. So I try not to overpower the pencils, but I always try to figure out what is it that how can I get the pencils to its maximum power and efficacy and its optimal visual, or the way it looks. How can I help this? So in other words, if somebody, I'll give you an example. If somebody's pencils are very soft and rounded, I might apply a little bit of an angular line to it. And the reason being that angularity or a straight line is more powerful than a rounded line. A rounded line is softer and a little bit, not as powerful. And if somebody comes along and starts drawing in a cubist style, I'll try to soften it to try to meet a middle ground. But it's a balancing act. It's a real balancing act. You don't want to go too far. You want to do just enough to help the pencils along. When I'll say this, and one of the things that I try to do with, or that I've noticed about John Romita Jr.'s pencils, is that he tends to draw mouths too small. And so I'll stretch them out just a little bit, so because I've inked him forever. I hope he doesn't see this. Forever. So I know that he tends to draw mouths a little bit too small. And so just a little bit on the edges, I stretch it out a little bit. And to make it look a little bit more, I don't know, just it's my aesthetic, I think. But in terms of, making sure that one doesn't overpower the other, it's a balancing act. And one of the really interesting things about comics and working with people is that it changes from penciler to inker to page to page to page to scene to scene to scene. Sometimes pencilers are better with environments, sometimes they're not. Sometimes pencilers are better with texture, sometimes they're not. Sometimes with faces, sometimes with anatomy, sometimes with wrinkles. It runs the entire spectrum. So I always try to see how I can best interpret the pencils, and then go ahead and do that. And it's not always successful. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Yeah.
Hey, Andrew. It looks like you froze on my end, so I'm gonna remove you for 1 second and bring you right back in.
Okay, sure.
I know that Klaus can still hear me, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in some questions as well that we have coming up, because we are getting a bunch, and I want to make sure that I get these put up there for the folks.
Sure.
I'm trying to keep things in order with what we're discussing, though, so I will backtrack on the questions for anybody that I'm missing, so I apologize. This question from John Damien. Do you think that there's a future in inking for new inkers, or do you need to do pencils also at this point in time?
I do think that there's a future for inkers, but I think that the future, regardless of what period of time we're in terms of the evolution of comics or where we are in the development of comics, the best inkers draw, and you can't really be a A-level inker unless you know how to draw. And the reason being that you have to be able to understand what the penciler is trying to do. And you can't really understand it until you actually do what the penciler is doing. So in other words, the first 10 years of my career was inking without understanding what the penciler is doing. So it's like looking at something from the outside and staying on the outside and trying to understand it. Did I freeze? Yeah, to hell with them. Did I freeze? Am I okay?
No, you're great. You're great.
Okay. So the route to being an inker has to be that you know how to draw also. Or let me say the route to being an A-level inker has to be that you know how to draw. And the best inkers have always known how to draw. Joe Sinnott, Wally Wood, Tom Palmer, Dick Giordano, those guys knew how to draw. Yeah. And that's why they were the best inkers in the industry. So that question is, yes, I do think there is a future for inkers, but the future as an inker has to incorporate that you know how to draw.
Here's a question for you. Let's say 5 years from now, what do you envision the comic industry to be like?
I think that there'll be, we do have to get through this period first, and see what's left. But I think comics are going to survive. I think that there will be less, 5 years from now, there will be less floppies. There will be less monthly books. I think there will be more graphic novels. I think we may approach, certainly not become, but approach the European model where, an artist might do 1 or 2 graphic novels a year. I think there will be more companies. I think there will be more publishers. I think there will be more self-publishing. I think right now, as a matter of fact, the thing that I hear that's going on right now that's fascinating is everybody seems to be connected to the idea of publishing their own work. So a lot of self-publishing will emerge from the pandemic. But I think 5 years from now, less floppies, more graphic novels, more companies, publishing houses, and more self-publishing. Yeah.
I think that this is, you might think that this is kind of silly when I say it, but I really view this as kind of a second golden age, even before everything going on, because the possibilities for people to really put product out there and create things and really get it directly to the people buying it. It's never been like this before. Yeah. And it's a huge boom. So many times people are so caught up in the numbers of, the comic shop sales, but it's not just that anymore. Now you have the book market, you have these Kickstarters and funding to create these news stories and putting things out there, or web comics.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's right.
Webtoons had over 100 billion views last year, Klaus. 100 billion.
Yeah. No,
I mean, that's not a joke.
You're right, Anthony. That's definitely an option. The other thing that I see, and I didn't mean to interrupt, but the other thing that I see coming down the pike, which is already happening, is less superheroes. Less more fantasy, more sci-fi, more horror, more personal stuff, more Daniel Klauss, more the opportunities are there. People need to understand that the opportunities are there, I think, but they also need to understand that it's self-starting.
Yes,
that's going to be the operative word or phrase for a long time. Yeah. What do you think, Anthony?
I truly believe that this is a great opportunity for people to get out there and create more so than ever. And I've said this many a time, but I'm looking for my regular.
Oh, you froze. This is gonna. We're never going to let you live this down.
Oh, I look for, as long as you got one of these.
That's right.
You can do whatever you want.
I know. Isn't that amazing? Because that's a really low expenditure, right? I mean, that's really, it's incredible. Yeah.
A piece of paper.
Yep.
A pencil.
Yep.
You can make magic.
That's right.
I always say making comics is magic, because you take a flat piece of paper and create an entire world, give it dimension. It's really incredible.
I agree, totally. Yeah, it's magic. It is. You're totally right. It's magical. I
have another question for you, and I apologize, Klaus, for the rush on this. I'm just trying to make sure I get this. Matt Keller, what project that you worked on?
Matt Keller.
I had to get him in there.
That's let me. There's been a couple that I really think of as personal favorites, and that's what we're really talking about, personal favorites. Sure. Daredevil with Frank, I thought was just an amazing time, an amazing period. Daredevil End of Days with Brian Michael Bendis, David Mack, and Bill Sienkiewicz. I loved working on that. It was a great script. Probably the best script that I've ever worked on. The Batman Black and White that Marc Chiarellos edited, that I wrote and drew many years ago. And I think, what I'm working on now, Sacred Creatures with my friend Pablo, what I'm penciling and inking my own pages, my part of the story, and Pablo's penciling and inking his part of the story, and we're writing it together. And that's a very self-indulgent process. And, I get to spend a week or two on a page, and, it's self-indulgent, and you don't get to do that on a monthly deadline. And I really enjoy that. But I think those books, Gothic with Grant Morrison was really awesome. Working with somebody that's as talented as that, is doesn't happen every day. Yeah. Thank you, Matt.
I just love hearing you say all that stuff. I just think it's so awesome. You just ran down a list of such incredible people to work with, and you've had such a wonderful career, and I know it's just going to continue. And I think it's absolutely wonderful. I could literally talk to you all day, Klaus. I apologize. I apologize, because I really could. And there's so many questions with somebody, with your workload and what you've done in your career, that you could just talk all day and ask you questions and soak it up like a sponge. For anyone that wants to follow you online or to see what you've got going on, how can they follow you? Where can they check you out?
I don't tweet a lot, and I don't post a lot on Instagram, but I'm there, in a sort of half-assed way. But that's it. I don't have a website, or, I don't know. Those are the only ways, right, Anthony? Tweeting and posting on Instagram.
Sure. And, you are, I don't mind giving a shout out to the guys over at Essential Sequential.
Oh, yeah.
Some beautiful video drawings over there. I mean, you know, you got that going a lot with Cully Hamner and those guys. And
right, we're doing another one on Saturday. We're doing a live drawing, so I think we'll probably be doing that every Saturday. I think around 1 o'clock. So essentialsequential.com. Yeah. Thanks, Anthony, for reminding me. Yeah, I appreciate it.
No, look, I join in and I just watch and write my comments on the side like everybody else, and I just love it.
It's fun.
So I just want to say thank you so much for joining us today. I want to say thank you to everyone for tuning in and watching. This was absolutely incredible, Klaus. You're always such a thoughtful speaker and give really wonderful information. You have a wonderful way of conveying that to the listener, and I think it's absolutely fantastic. And I can't thank you enough.
Anthony, you froze, but let me just say. It isn't, you know, there are times when I do these kinds of things, or you talk to people online, or you do interviews, and, you know, 3/4 of it is just baloney. So it's good to talk to a fellow artist and somebody that's in the business and somebody who takes it as seriously as you do. So I'm not giving you baloney. I'm giving you the real.
I'm going to write that out as a quote and just wear that around on a t-shirt. It's going to be great.
Anthony, we'll do it again anytime.
Oh, definitely. Guys, thank you all so much for tuning in. Be sure to check out the Kubert School Saturday morning with Lee Weeks doing a free session drawing Batman, teaching everyone how to do it. And thanks everybody for checking it out. kubertschool.edu. I'll talk to you all real soon. Thanks again, guys.
Thanks, Anthony.
Bye.